Hey, my name's Joe, and in this video I'm hoping to answer a question that we get asked a lot. How big a narrowboat should I buy? I'm going to share what I've learned over the past couple of years all about how important size is.
You know, bigger is better.
As a bit of background, I bought this boat with my wife and other half of the channel, Danny. Back in 2021, we were travelling in a Sprinter that we converted during lockdown at the time. We were joking about what project we could tackle next, and a boat or narrowboat got brought up in conversation, and within 5 minutes I was scouring eBay. There was one that had only just been listed. It was within this budget that we plucked out of thin air. We didn't really have it because all of our money was tied up in the van. We were in Italy at the time, so we couldn't even go and view it. I really didn't want to miss out on it though, so I sent my dad down with a deposit, and the rest is history. It's safe to say that we had a severe lack of knowledge about narrowboats. Buying one completely empty was a little bit daunting, to be honest, but we quickly learnt the ropes. The knots were a little bit harder to learn.
Who tied the knots then?
So back to the question, what size narrowboat should you buy? Obviously there's no right or wrong answer here, but there's definitely things that will give you a maximum or minimum boat length to search for at least. I'll start with a little bit more about our boat. It's a 50-foot narrowboat with a cruiser stern. If you're not into your boat lingo just yet, cruiser stern basically means it's a bit more of an open rear deck. There's positives and negatives to this. It's great to have the outside space when you're cruising, and particularly when you've got guests. Everyone wants to stay out the back and have a chat, but it does eat up into the internal living space that you've got. The other option is what's called a trad or traditional stern, which you've literally got a little step big enough to steer from and not a lot else. There's also semi-trad, which sort of combines the two, but it's just something to bear in mind. Inside we've only really got 30 or 35 foot of actual internal living space. Our stern deck takes up about 8 foot, and up at the bow or the front, that's roughly 10 foot in total, with 5 foot of that being a seating area. Most boats will actually have that seating area up at the bow, but ours is probably on the larger side. So when you're looking at boats, if you've got a minimum size in mind, then just make sure how much actual internal living space you need. Within our remaining 30 or 35 foot, our boat's actually laid out in what's called reverse layout. So our bed's up at the front or the bow, whereas on traditional working boats, you'd have the boatman's cabin at the stern, and then all of the goods would be carried up at the bow. I'm assuming this is where it comes from, but I'm more than happy to be corrected on that. It might even be from more recent hire boat days when they would have just had the standard layout. Talking of hire boats, this boat actually used to be a Black Prince hire boat. I think it was 6 berth back in its heyday. For us, we've gone for a fixed small double bed along one side to allow a walkway down the other. We've then got a walk-through bathroom. It's not the norm, but it works for us. Generally, you'll have a corridor down one side, a bit like our bed, but because the boss wanted a bath, it just opened the space up for us. And after living in a van for 6 months and a boat for on and off 2 years, there really is no privacy left in this relationship. Then we've got our open kitchen living room. We went for a kitchen spaced along one side, and then with an L-shape worktop. Then we've got a small sofa bed for when guests stay. There's also the 2 cupboards at the end with washing machine and electricals and batteries and stuff, plus the stern doors that will get finished over the next couple of weeks for anyone that watches regularly. So that's our layout of a 50 foot. It's a bit of a fluke that everything fits into this space that we didn't really know how big 50 foot was to begin with, but we just had a rough plan and everything fits. 50 foot's been a good starting point for us. People could definitely live comfortably on a smaller boat, and it all depends if you're going to be continuously cruising liverboards or just going out on weekends. There's one thing going out on weekends on a 21 foot wilderness, which are probably the cutest things on the canal, but could I live on one full time? Probably not. That said, we did live in the van for 6 months, which I'd say is smaller than a 21 foot wilderness. The one thing I'd love to do, and it would be possible, is actually add another 7 or 8 foot to this boat by cutting and welding. Not me personally, I'd get a professional to do it, but it is doable. That would bring us up to the magic number or golden number, which I'll come back to in a minute, and add in a permanent office. I'm always editing or doing something on the computer, and the only real space when I've got all my stuff sprawled out is here, and when Danny's cooking or I haven't washed up or dried up, it just slows down progress a little bit. I'm not saying that an additional office wouldn't be possible on a 50 foot at all, because if the boat's got a trad stern or a shorter bow, then there probably would be room. So make sure you consider how much internal space there is itself, rather than the overall length of the boat, because it's not always black and white. Now moving on to longer boats, everything on the canal tends to be 72 foot or less. This is because the maximum size of a lock is 75 foot bar a couple. The golden number I mentioned is actually 58 feet 6 inches. Thanks to Wilton Marina's website, I got some numbers. A 58 foot 6 inch is suitable for the whole system, except you can't cruise the last few hundred yards of the Little Ouse River to the town of Brandon in Norfolk. A 62 foot will get you through canals on the network, except the Calder and Hebble the Huddersfield Broad Canal and the Ripon Canal, and then a 70-footer will get you around most of the system. If you're planning to live full time on a narrowboat, we would recommend that you look for a boat 57 feet in length and above, for the main reason that the extra space you gain will be very much appreciated and it will possibly make day-to-day living more pleasant. As you might have seen, we've been pretty happy with our 50 foot over the past couple of years, although we've only been living aboard on and off for probably a year of that because we were completely fitting it out. There is something important to consider and not just going for the biggest boat that you find. Cost. Not just the boat itself that will generally cost more to buy. I'll make another video all about costs and buy-in tips, but everything on the canal is charged by length. Whether it's the cost of blacking every few years or mooring fees to canal and river licenses, everything is charged by length. The license, for example, our boat is 50 foot and costs £1,065 per year, which is 89 a month. If you go up to 72 foot, it's 1,372 quid, which is 115 a month. So a difference of about 25 quid a month. It's not massive, but if you don't need the space, it's an additional cost. Moorings are also pro rata. Our previous one was 350 a month. If we were to have a 72 foot, that would actually be over 500 quid. It's not major, but just worth noting if the boat's actually bigger than you need. Manoeuvrability is something to consider, but not anything I'd worry too much about. You'll get used to the size of your boat. Even this 50 foot felt quite difficult to manoeuvre for us at the beginning. Although seeing 72 foots up against our boat in the flesh do look a little bit daunting to turn. Roof space an added bonus with a bigger boat. Obviously you can fit more solar, or in Danny's case a bigger garden. We've got roughly 700 watts on ours and takes up about half the space. There's also the option to go wide beam, which doubles your internal space. One thing to bear in mind with the wide beam is they are restricted, I believe, in the East and West Midlands at points because of narrow locks and canals. You can't actually get them up through there, so you could either be locked up in the north or locked down in the south. They really do open up the internal space and you might not need as long a boat. Then there's draft and air draft, which isn't really a problem for narrow boats. This is basically how tall it is for bridges and how low in the water it sits. This is more of a problem with sailing boats and river cruisers and Dutch barges with lovely wheelhouses. Something to consider, but if you're only looking at narrow boats, then don't worry too much. I think I've covered most parts. If I've missed anything important, please let me know in the comments. Just remember to ask yourself where you want to go, how many of you, and for how long you want to stay on the boat. You should be fine. Thanks for watching. Thank you to our patrons, and I hope you'll join me next week for some more cruising on the Kent and Avon.